Welcome back to another Kentucky Derby profile here on Racing Rundown. On this video, we're going to be talking about Taiba, the winner of the Santa Anita Derby, one of the two former Bob Baffert trained horses in the Kentucky Derby, now in the barn with trainer Tim Yakteen. We're not going to get into any of the politics or any of the arguments around that situation. If you want to know how we feel about that, you can certainly listen to them numerous times we've talked about it on Racing Rundown, but we're just going to talk about the horse Taiba, who there's a lot to unpack with him. Only 2 career starts, and I'll get into everything with Taiba after we look at his replays, but I will mention I am going to be doing a lot of history looking at with Taiba, because Taiba's one of the few horses where I think looking at history really is relevant. But as I mentioned, we'll get into the previews, we'll get into the replays. We'll start off with his maiden breaking effort, which was in March on San Felipe Day. So now getting into his maiden victory, as you can see right here, he is number 4. I have to apologize if I do slip and call this horse Medina Spirit, because I am used to talking about Amr Zidane Silks with Medina Spirit. But as you can see right here, Johnny V gets him into the game. He's not putting him immediately up there on the lead, but he's sitting off the long shot, getting a good second place position here. He's inside of number 7, Magic in the Moonlight. And he's right now just taking the lead here. And he's running very similarly to the way that you often see these really good Bob Baffert 2-year-old / in the last few years, 3-year-old horses when they break their debut. As you can see, 3 wide here, that's his stablemate Mauritius, who is not that good of a horse, but worth mentioning that is one of his Bob Baffert, or former Bob Baffert stablemates. But off the turn here, he's cruising 45-3. As I already mentioned, I didn't mention the quarter mile time, but 22-1 for him here, and he's pulling away. Very, very impressive debut effort. He's going to earn a 103 figure for this. That is better than any other horse in the crop, and equal to Messier. And as I talked about with the Epicenter preview, I think that Messier figure was certainly very inflated by the level of competition that Messier was running against in the Bob Lewis. Getting into the Santa Anita Derby now with Taiba. As I mentioned with him earlier, this is a horse who is doing something very, very unprecedented. No horse had ever won the Santa Anita Derby before Taiba with just 1 career start. So the fact that he's even here in the Santa Anita Derby is remarkable. If you listen to my preview on the Santa Anita Derby, I got into, the reason why I didn't think he could win was because of how improbable it was that he was even in the Santa Anita Derby. But he's going to sit a very similar trip, at least early on, to how he sat in his maiden race. Forbidden Kingdom, the winner of the San Felipe, is going to go out there and set the kind of early fractions that he sat in the San Felipe, or at least a little bit slower than that, but same idea. Messier's sitting off of him about a length or 2 behind him, and Taiba's getting that perfect stalking trip. Mike Smith gets the perfect trip with Taiba in this race. Forbidden Kingdom's going out there. I don't have the excuse to get into it with Forbidden Kingdom because he's not in the Derby this year, but he's going about 1.5 miles, or 1.5 miles per hour slower in this race than he did in the San Felipe Stakes. So they're not going as fast as maybe some folks have suggested that they have been. So at this point, though, Messier is starting to get into Forbidden Kingdom, and Mike Smith is getting Taiba back into the race. He let the 2 horses that had more speed than him earlier, not necessarily had more speed than him, but wanted to show more speed than him, go out there, do their thing. Forbidden Kingdom's done at this point. Messier's off the turn, and I don't think Messier is particularly tired at this point. As I mentioned, they weren't going as fast as I think some folks may think they are. But at this point, you're starting to see the true ability that Taiba has here. And I don't know how good Taiba is, but I do know one thing. Messier at least has some kind of talent because he has won a couple of graded stakes races. And for a horse to do this to a proven graded stakes horse in his 2nd career start, that's certainly very remarkable. Now that we finished up the replays, I want to get into my pros and cons with Taiba going into this Kentucky Derby. My first pro is the fact that he's here. I've mentioned how improbable his run up to this point has been. And that is something that cannot be understated. I'm going to get into the history in a little bit more in just a minute, but I want to show a stat from the Kentucky Derby media guide history. As you can see right here, only 4 other horses have even started in the Kentucky Derby with just 2 career starts, and the best finish was a 6th place finish in 2000. Has not happened since then. So the fact that Taiba is going to the Kentucky Derby, and China Visit wasn't coming into the Kentucky Derby out of the same kind of effort that Taiba was coming into the Kentucky Derby out of. So the fact that he's here coming out of a Grade 1 victory in the Santa Anita Derby, certainly remarkable. Second pro, his figures. He has the two of the best figures in the crop. His maiden breaking effort was the best figure, period. He shares it with Messier, but I think that Bob Lewis, and Messier ran a 103 in the Bob Lewis. I think that Messier figure from the Bob Lewis was incredibly inflated. I think the Taiba figure may also be a little bit inflated, but I'm not gonna make that argument because it was a very nice 7-length victory for him there. And then his figure in the Santa Anita Derby was spectacular. It is the same level as Epicenter ran in the Louisiana Derby, so he's right up there with the favorite for the Kentucky Derby. And then his flashy victories, as I mentioned, he broke his maiden by 7.5 lengths. He beat Messier by 2.25 lengths in the Santa Anita Derby, and they were 10 lengths clear of the 3rd place finisher Happy Jack in there. So he's won races the way you want to see a Kentucky Derby horse, potentially a Kentucky Derby favorite, win those kind of races. Now we'll get into the cons, and I'm going to lope in the lack of experience and the history aspect with him. Touched on it a little bit earlier, but no horse has ever won the Kentucky Derby with just 2 lifetime starts. I think there is actually one, and I can't remember what horse that was, but dating back to 1937, no horse has won the Kentucky Derby with just 2 lifetime starts. We'll go back even further to history. A single horse has won the Kentucky Derby going back to 1882 without a start at 2, and that was Justify. Before Justify did it, that was always the thing about horses going into the Kentucky Derby, and there had been solid efforts. Bodemeister, Strode's Creek was a runner-up in the 1994 Kentucky Derby, but Justify was the only horse that had been able to do it, and Justify is the only horse that we've ever seen do it. And I know Apollo did it, but there's, obviously, there's no replays of Apollo because he was from the 19th century. So I don't know what kind of horse Apollo was. So for all intent and purposes, the only horse that's ever done this is Justify. And a lot of people have been saying the Justify comparisons with Taiba. And I don't think that they're necessarily wrong, but I think it's a little bit steep to expect every horse to be Justify. Now, could Taiba be Justify? Certainly. And I am of the belief that if he is good enough to win the Kentucky Derby, he's going to win the Triple Crown, because he is going to have to be the greatest Derby winner that we have ever seen to be able to do this, because of how improbable this is. I think it's lost on people because Justify did it, just how difficult it is to do to win the Kentucky Derby without a start at 2. And again, the argument has been made, well, Justify was able to do it. Yes, but Justify was on one horse. For every one Justify, and there's only one Justify, but for every Justify, there's 15 others like Rock Your World or Magnum Moon. Now, Magnum Moon had trouble, but Magnum Moon, Materiality, Verrazano, those horses that looked really good going into the Kentucky Derby, that it was just too much too soon for them. And that's the big concern that I have for Taiba, and a reason why I don't think I'll be able to use him to win in the Kentucky Derby, because I just can't get past the history aspect with him. History is very murky to handicap off of, but I think this is one angle that, unless this horse is better than Justify, then I think that history is going to continue. And as I mentioned, if you think he's better than Justify, I don't think you're wrong to think that, but that is not something that I want to pin my Derby hopes on with him. The other problem is the lack of experience. He has never faced adversity. In his maiden race, he was able to sit a very friendly trip against 7 horses. And then in the Santa Anita Derby, again, very similar. Friendly trip, didn't have any traffic to contend with, and was just able to run by Messier late in the stretch. Taiba is running in the Kentucky Derby now, 20 horses. It's very, very rare that you do not have trouble in the Kentucky Derby. It has happened before, but it's extremely rare. And I think it's, once again, it's very difficult to justify pinning the ability to win the Kentucky Derby on a horse like Taiba on the fact that he's not going to get traffic, because it's very rare that you don't get traffic in the Kentucky Derby. And my final con for him is that he's been beating up on suspect competition. His maiden race, the competition was truly awful. I think one horse has come back to run decently since then, and that was after dropping to maiden claiming level. And Eric actually pulled some stats for me in terms of the figures, and there was a lot of figure regression. There was only one horse that increased on figures, and once again, that was the horse who dropped to maiden claiming level. Getting to the Santa Anita Derby, I already mentioned how I think Messier has an inflated figure. I don't think Forbidden Kingdom's that good. I think Forbidden Kingdom is also inflated by beating up on the competition in California. The California competition has been truly awful this year, and it hasn't been discussed enough just how terrible the California horses are. Happy Jack is in the Kentucky Derby this year after being beaten 12 lengths in the Santa Anita Derby. And I don't have the chart in front of me, so I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but he was beaten a ton in the San Felipe. And it hasn't gotten the discussion that I think it should. And I think that that's reason to be concerned about Taiba. Is he justified? He may very well be, but I can't make that distinction right now because it is just so improbable to see Taiba do something that has really never been done before. As I said, if he wins the Kentucky Derby, he's going to win the Triple Crown. He will be probably the greatest Derby winner ever if he's able to do this. But I cannot, at least, I mean, I'm showing my cards right now, but I cannot justify pinning my hopes of winning the Kentucky Derby this year on a horse that has this many questions to ask. Talented, yes. Brilliant potential, absolutely. But I think this might just be too much too soon for Taiba. But maybe you think he's justified, and if you do, I'm not going to disagree with you because I can certainly see why you would think that. And with that being mentioned, that's it for this preview. We'll see you next time. Have a good one, and hope we were able to help you out with this one.